Hello, this is Morning Heart Game Studios. This video is the first video that I try to make a tutorial on the YouTube. This video is about Unity physics. There are a lot of tutorials on the YouTube that talking about Unity physics, but it's still not very clear for beginner to how to fast get the Unity physics into our interface. I will give a very fast and shortcut to bootstrap our tutorial to the Unity physics. The first question is how can we get the trigger and the collide events? Actually, the Unity physics documentation already talk about that, but it's still not that clear. It says we can capture the events doing with the collision event job. This job is just iterate through all the events and capture that. How can we get a per entity based event capture mechanism? This is not as that complex as we may imagine. Actually, the Unity technology already gives a lot of samples on the Unity physics, and we can adapt their codes for our uses. I recommend you to first download this repo, Unity technology, and this repo. The link will be provided under the comments section. When you download this repo, please go to the physics samples folder and take a look at the events folder. Actually, the assets events folder, and you can make use of the stateful folders codes. This folder's code constructs a system that distributes the events from the Unity physics system to per entity, and only distributes to the entity that has certain components. In my case, I make a projectile. The projectile, I have already copied their code in here. Take a look. Scripts is the stateful. Just copy the code into the folder, and I attach a script on my prefab. The script is the stateful collision event buffer authoring. There's also another script that can capture the trigger events, the stateful trigger event buffer authoring. When you attach this script onto your entity or prefab, you can get the events as in the form of a buffer. It's not that hard. Imagine you have a Unity projectile component, okay? It will give the dynamic buffer that stores the stateful collision events. And this component, stateful collision event component, it provides very similar structure as the collision class in the game object mode, like the entity, the game object that happens the collision event states, like enter, stay, and exit. When you have this script, you can capture the events, and the events will be cleared each frame. The events buffer will be cleared after each frame. You can iterate through the events and check the state manually to handle each event at their state. In my example, I detect the collision when the collision enter, and I spawn a hit effect. Then I add some hit info to a corresponding collide entity. That's the collided object, game object. With this buffer, you can just do the collision handle mechanism as you usually did in the game object mode. Add the stateful collision event buffer authoring, and you can get all you want. And if you select the calculate details, the detail will be calculated. So what's the detail? The detail is mainly about the contact point and the normal or anything else. If you need, you just tick it on, and you can to access the buffer, the events, and the details, the collision details data. You get the shortcut to handle or to get the collision event without writing any code. Just make use of Unity samples. That's a very fast path. The second question is about how to enable or disable a physics, rigidbody, or a collider. Through my test, the fast answer is we should manipulate with the physics word index. This value says the word that the physics calculation happens. If you change the value to a non-existent word, like the value of 1, the default value is 0. The default word index is 0. If you change it to 1, the simulation will not be involved. Then a further question is, how does this mechanism happens? Do we really need a physics rigidbody? How can we create this physics word inside? This component will automatically create when you have a rigidbody. If you have a rigidbody, you have a physics word index component. But the component value is default set to 1 or set to 0. And you cannot change it because the backing of this component is written by Unity. But there's a fast way to change the word index before the bake happens. We can determine which rigidbody will not get simulated or get simulated before the game happens. The quick answer is just a physics word index authoring. With this script, we can change the physics word index. For example, in my case, I give this static main default collider and rigidbody, also the physics word index, and change the value to 0. This collider will respond to the collision. And I also have the ragdoll system, the whole ragdoll system. For the ragdoll system, the part of the ragdoll, I assign the value of 1. So this ragdoll's part, the rigidbody will not get simulated, only simulated when I change the value to 0. The implementation to runtime change the physics word index is rather simple than we may expect. It's just that component, I have to say. But I recommend you to make a enable component data. For example, there's a on-off component data, and when it's on, I will set the component. Just notice the physics word index is a shared component. You should use the set shared component and set the value in runtime with the job system, with the ECS. So there are more additional things that I want to tell you. First question is, if you do not have a rigidbody, then you cannot have a physics word index. You cannot expect to just have a collider but add a physics word index to make it not simulating. The next note is the isKinematic in ECS. If you to go on the isKinematic in ECS, it will not prohibit the collider from taking effect. The isKinematic only change the mass setting and the inertial tensor to make it behave like a kinematic, but the collider will still apply its effect. For example, there are two shooter here. They both with the rigidbody kinematic and has a collider, also has a physics word index of 0 that says it will run the physics simulation. But what will you expect with the isKinematic to go on? Generally, in game object mode, we will say the collider will not take effect, but in ECS, the collider will take effect. So let me show that to you. This is a great point that I test through almost an hour. You see, the collider will take effect, or else the projectile will not collide with that. So it says the collider with its kinematic rigidbody will still works as not kinematic. What has kinematic to go unchanged? It's change the gravity factor. Change the gravity factor to 0. Normally it will be 1 if the rigidbody is not kinematic. Also, it's changed the physics mass inertial. Inverse inertial is the inverse mass is 0, the inverse inertial is 0. So the physics rigidbody sort application will not take any effect because the mass is 0. If you apply an impulse or do some explosion, it will not react. But you should notice is the rigidbody will not react to you, but the collider will still react to you. But if you give the authoring, give the physics word index authoring the word index of 1, that means change the physics simulation to not simulated on this entity, the collider will not respond to you. We can do a fast test. Now it runs, it shoots, and now you can see the process take effect with the word index 0. Now I will change it to 1, this entity. Okay, change the word index to 1. Change the value here, will take effect. You see the projectile pass through the collider and hit on the ground. But if we change it back to 0, okay, the collider will happens. We can conclude that whether the collider work, there are two factors. First, if it has a physics word index, it will be determined by the physics word index. Second, if there's no physics word index, it will always take effect. Additional information that I will say about the physics collider. You can see there's a response collision. Also, there's a material. That's the collision response. Actually, the collision response has 3 types: collider, race, collision events, race trigger events, and none. None will skip all. But we cannot touch this because the API is not open for us. But there's another path to change collision response value. To do this, you have to incorporate the additional codes from the physics sample. That will be in the assets and the samples and the Unity physics. You should copy this folder's custom physics authoring to your project. When you copy that, you will see you have additional authoring component that's written by Unity. That's physics body or physics shape. In here, the physics shape gives a port to set the material and the material's collision response. So in here, you can select this and change the whether the collider, how the collider responds. But the physics shape is overlap with the traditional collider. You have to delete one. If you decide to use the custom physics authoring component, you should delete the traditional physics collider. Also, there's a physics body. The physics body provides more customization on the rigidbody than the traditional rigidbody component. It actually exposes the values of the component, ECS component, to the authoring part. You can change the motion part to dynamic, kinematic, and static. It says the same thing, that if it's kinematic, it will behave as kinematic. It will not change anything about the collider. The collider is the collider. The rigidbody is the rigidbody in the ECS view. So they are separate. Thank you.